Recently I made a reaction to the Australian weapon system and amazing innovation, the Slinger. I was very impressed. I've also made some reactions to the Australian military as well, and I asked for more recommendations along those lines. And someone asked me to check out this one. It's called Why the Aussies Chose the Steyr AUG Bullpup, and I believe that's actually a type of gun. So, I mean, that's a cool name for a gun, a bullpup. But yeah, these are things I don't really know much about, but it's like, I find it quite interesting to learn about these weapon systems and weapons and so on, and just about the Australian military in general, being one of our closest allies, being British. I guess it's something I should do, is just learn as much as I can. So tell me more about this, what you think about it, and yeah, let's check out.
G'day warriors, let's talk about our mates down under in the Australian Army and their primary weapon system, the Steyr AUG. In this video, we're going to cover how it was invented, the story behind its adoption, beating out the M16, and we'll find out where the future of this firearm is going. One of its first tests was in Somalia. The Australian Army patrolled the narrow, crowded streets, and the gun was critical in their success there. The Australian Army protected NGOs, and they delivered over 8,000 tons of grain to 137 different villages, all while destroying the insurgent presence there.
You see, that's the sort of thing I want to learn about as well, is like, again, Australia be one of our closest allies. We can look at big conflicts and their role in that. But I also want to know about the good things they do as well in here, like in Somalia, helping get rid of the insurgents, but also being like that humanitarian side, helping get the food delivered and that sort of thing as well. I think it's always good to focus on the good things that militaries can bring to a country and to other countries, rather than just focusing too much on the big conflicts themselves.
The firearm will always be a part of history, since it was the first bullpup to be adopted by a major military. The bullpup concept of putting the firing mechanism and ammo behind the trigger was first invented in 1901 by an English gunsmith named Thornycroft. He succeeded in making the gun lighter weight, but the recoil was brutal, so it was never really used in service. 76 years later of perfecting the concept of the bullpup, the Austrians came up with the Steyr AUG and adopted it into their own military.
The Australian Army recently declassified this document from 1988, and it outlines the results of their competition between the Steyr AUG and the Colt M16A2.
It states all of the Aussies' official reasons for why they chose the Steyr AUG as their main rifle. You know it's an Australian military document because it literally has a picture of a kangaroo eclipsing two swords on the cover page. Nice. When I read through the 200-page document, I could clearly hear the Australian Army's love for the Steyr AUG that actually extends all the way to today. The summary says, quote, "The results clearly demonstrated that from an engineering viewpoint, the performance of the Steyr was significantly superior to the Colt M16A2 in most respects."
Yeah, tell me, I know that with some of my previous videos, there's been people in the comments who have been part of the Australian military who are currently still part of it. Tell me what you think about the gun. Have you used it? How does it compare in your opinion to other guns? Is it that much better?
Particularly in terms of endurance and adverse conditions. The Steyr AUG A1 is recommended as the system most closely satisfying the requirements and is considered suitable for introduction into service without modification, end quote. You can see the testers believe the AUG was infallible. Quote from one of the testers, "AUG, more like AUG yeah." In all of the data presented here, it shows the AUG outclasses the M16A2 in every single category from accuracy to reliability. They make it easy to see a side-by-side pass, fail, rundown. The Steyr passed all of them, while the M16A2 took the struggle bus through the whole competition. I'm not surprised the American Colt M16 failed that one test category titled "Go on a 200-mile walkabout, then successfully chug a 6-pack of Fosters while riding a kangaroo." By all accounts, from military analysts to soldiers, this weapon system has performed great in the Australian Army. The only real complaint that you ever see is with the gun's tough trigger pull. The original heavy trigger pull was a problem. It was a heavy 9 pounds. If you really want to understand what makes the Steyr special, then you don't really need to look any further than its name. It's a German acronym for Universal Army Rifle. The reason it's called this is because it had this revolutionary feature for its time of being able to be several different weapons all in one. This, I think, was another key reason why it was chosen by the Australian Army. The AUG is considered a modular system So it could be a submachine gun if you put the 14-inch barrel on, or you could put the heavy barrel configuration on where it had a 24-inch barrel. It's used either as a designated marksman or a light machine gun with a 42-round magazine.
Okay, so this is very interesting to me, although I don't have like a huge knowledge of weapons. Like, it's cool to learn about it here. I do like well-engineered products, definitely modular, things that are designed in that modular fashion. I've got like cameras like that where you can like mix and match different things. To see a gun that has so much flexibility and yeah, that's like this, I never knew that was a thing. So really eye-opening for me. Tell me, like, yeah, again, like what you think about that sort of system. And also tell me why other militaries wouldn't use this gun over anything else.
It fires the 5.56 rounds at a muzzle velocity of 970 meters per second, which is faster than the M4. It has a rate of fire of between 700 and 850 rounds per minute. It weighs 7.3 pounds with a 16.5-inch barrel. I also need your help with something here because I'm trying to reconcile this interesting question. If all the data shows that the Steyr AUG Bullpup is way better than the M4, then why do most special forces units around the world use the M4 instead?
Like
as with most revolutionary guns of its time, this weapon had some reliability problems when it first went into service, but that was quickly resolved and the gun proved itself formidable in combat during Afghanistan. It's possible though that this initial poor launch turned Australian special forces off to the weapon. There are some nutty theories out there on the internet where a handful of people believe it wasn't chosen for its performance, but because of political factors instead. For instance, Colt said that they wouldn't let the Australian Army have the license to manufacture the M16 in their own country, even though it was very important to the Australians. Steyr, on the other hand, offered to let them make the AUG however they wanted, wherever they wanted. There's an interesting claim here that after World War II, Australia really wanted to keep the production of their primary weapon made on their home country's soil, like a lot of other countries do today. The idea here is that the Australian Army tipped the scales in favor of the Steyr AUG in this trial competition back in 1988 so that the Steyr would win and they could produce this weapon in-house. But if you look at the document, it basically says that the Steyr AUG blew the M16 away in every category, in various trials and performance tests. The document claims that the AUG barrels will likely survive 20,000 plus rounds, while the M16 will only last 5,000 rounds. This kind of discrepancy in performance seems strange to me because the test performance doesn't line up with what the US Army test data shows about the M16A2 since then. To me, this is an interesting theory, but it could also just be the case that the Australian Army loved the Steyr AUG. It actually was a lot better than the M16A2, and it's just the cherry on top that they could produce this within their own country. The only piece of small evidence that goes against this, though, is that the Australian SF units, like the Special Air Service Regiment, they all use the M16, the M4 AR platform, or other traditional guns instead of the Bullpup or AUG as their primary weapon. Why is that?
I mean, there was obviously a huge incentive for the Australian Army to keep production in their own country.
It makes them not dependent on outside influence and allows them to create a whole military-industrial complex, which I've heard can be sort of profitable. The Australian Army has ever since then been strongly committed to their small arms manufacturing that happens in Lithgow. They've spent over $70 million in equipment and R&D in the past 10 years. Lithgow Arms employs 150 Australians, and the EF-88 weapon that they produce has led to a 95% satisfaction rate in the Australian Army, according to Defense.net. That's an insanely high satisfaction rate.
If you want to buy into those weird internet theories, one possible piece of evidence that it could be right is that there's some parts in the document where testers defend aspects of the AUG that are later seen to be negative.
The Australian Army lists the dual sear two-stage trigger as a positive, which I find odd because that seems to be the only thing that everyone agrees needed to be changed. That feature where you pulled halfway, it fired semi, and then you pull all the way and it fires automatic. Quote from the document: "It provided with a pull-through trigger system, which allows a speedy change from semi-automatic to automatic firing and vice versa." End quote. The only problem with that...
Would that ever be confusing to use, man? I feel like me as someone who has like very little knowledge, it would just be maybe like mistakenly fire it too much or something like that.
Old trigger design was when soldiers were getting shot at or they were under stress, they were likely to accidentally pull on the trigger hard and possibly accidentally engage the automatic fire. In later versions of the weapon system, they improved on that feature, gave it an ALO automatic lockout, which stops the trigger from being squeezed and accidentally firing automatic. Ever since its adoption by Austria, it's been a war between the bullpup and the traditional rifle concept. France and England shortly after that adopted bullpups as their primary rifles.
Did he just call Australia Austria or not? I don't know.
So is it the case that bullpups are ideal for conventional regular infantry forces but not for special forces? The Steyr is a pioneer in optics. It added a 1.5 times optic, which wasn't common at the time, and it gave it a huge advantage over systems that were running with only iron sights. When you look down the scope, you saw a unique looking black circle reticle, which troops nicknamed the Donut of Death, which sounds like something that would fall out of a dusty old 80s MRE. So maybe the idea that they fudge the tests in favor of the Steyr AUG is clickbait bullshit, and the bullpup in reality is way better than the M16. If you're a fan of the FBTV YouTube channel, the Firearms blog like I am, you've probably already seen their great video on this same topic. Or Forgotten Weapons, they have amazing content on all these weapons. You should check those out, obviously, I'm sure you already have. I believe the Firearms blog were the ones that they first uploaded this version of this document for everyone to be able to read through, so we really appreciate that. One thing is for sure though, that we can all agree on. This is an iconic weapon that has proven itself worthy in combat, and it's loved among infantry around the world. It's used in over 20 countries as their primary weapon, and the Australians have no plans of switching to anything else in the near future, which means we're gonna keep seeing this gun in movies and video games for ages. So please remember to like this video and subscribe.
Yeah, go subscribe to that channel. Interesting video, like that's the sort of thing I like to learn about. That the things that I have really little knowledge about is always good to, like, for me, I always find it enjoyable to watch videos about things like that. And yeah, this gun is one. Even things like, I'm always up for like a conspiracy theory. So what do you think about those theories about the tests being fudged to like be in favour of this gun? Do you think that's true or not? Tell me more about that. And yeah, if you have any experience of using this gun, what's it like? It looks pretty cool. It's got an interesting system in how it's yeah, like the modular system. So I think it's really interesting. And yeah, like, tell me about that difference between the special forces and the normal infantry, like why they use different guns in Australia. Could you ever see any of them changing? I guess they're not going to change from this as a primary gun, but what about special forces? Do you think they would ever use this? Yeah, keep recommending more videos like this. Very cool. Thanks.